Great morning, great afternoon, great evening, wherever this conversation finds you. I am Travis Gray. Today we are transforming with our guest, Dr. Katrina Michelle. Katrina facilitates holistic psychotherapy and has over 15 years of experience supporting people through psychedelic integration and spiritual emergence. She previously held a position at MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. I love saying that. As the director of harm reduction, and I love saying this one too. She was also the executive director for ACISTE, the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. Katrina is founder and director of The Curious Spirit, which honors the journey of the seeker by offering resources that encourage transcendent personal exploration to serve collective evolution. I am so stoked by this conversation, by that bio. This is going to be amazing. How are you, Katrina?
Hi, Travis. We got the big words out of the way. I'm great.
Yeah. I love all those acronyms. I love when, a good organizational acronym or do you know the work of Dr. Jeffrey Martin?
I know, yes, I do know a little bit about that, yes.
Okay. So he has like a PNSE, persistent non-symbolic experience, but he has a really cool acronym that is ONE. That's like, how did he think of this? ONE is ongoing non-symbolic experience. It's like, that's perfect. So I love the acronyms. I love getting all those words mashed together in cool ways.
Absolutely.
So
Thanks.
so great. I've been excited for this conversation. As we had just spoken about, I felt like we resonate with our research interests and transformative experiences, and especially those that are integrating the psychedelic experience in a safe way, in a way that is properly assisted by psychotherapy, properly integrated in the right set and setting, and it's amazing. So how did you begin in this work? How did you cultivate this interest in psychedelic experiences and begin your professional journey?
Yes, good question. Well, I think somewhere in my heart, I always knew I was going to be a therapist. Looking back on an 8th grade paper that my mom dug up, I apparently had myself labeled as a psychologist back then. So it was somewhere in my soul waiting to be born. And what really got me on this path in particular, this really special niche that we're both involved in of the transpersonal world, was my own spontaneous experience of what I would call psychedelic consciousness. And that was what Stan Groff refers to as a unitive experience of consciousness. And for me, that was completely unsolicited by any drugs or any spiritual practice. At the time, I was not doing any yoga or meditation or medicines at all. I was just a angsty 20-something walking through New York City, and of all places, coming off of the New York City subway. And I was struck by this sudden sense of love and interconnection and extreme empathy with all of the strangers around me. And it was absolute beauty. I had a sense of understanding of the cosmos. And it was all just perfectly clear to me. And then it was gone. And I was back in my 20-something body walking down the street as if nothing ever happened. So that was something. I didn't know what to make of it. It stayed with me for a long time. I didn't have language for it. And it wasn't until years later, after I had gotten into more traditional therapy practice, I became licensed as a clinical social worker. I had gone through working in the various systems of mental health care and the hospital system, and finally found my way back into transpersonal psychology, where I realized I was actually there to make more sense of my experience of that day, because it was so profound and had stayed with me for those 10 years or so. And So that's how I got into this particular niche that we are both involved in. It was really an effort to understand my own experience and to find a model that worked for me. And once I found language for it and was met by community who was as fascinated and opened up by studying these things as I was, I just kept going. So
Yeah, I mean, wow, it's so powerful, such a powerful experience to find language for your anomalous experience. The idea that you are tapping into the same psychedelic consciousness that is unsolicited is a really incredible idea as well, an incredible experience as well, an exceptional human experience that is unsolicited, an anomalous, an experience that is happening, unintentionally. And a lot of people go through a spiritual emergency sort of experience when something like this happens to them, and so they often are not having the language for this. And you do work with spiritual emergence. How have you been able to support others in that sort of container, or that sort of integration, that sort of spiritual emergency? Maybe their family members, the people around them, their community is not able to hold them safely in this experience.
yeah, and I think this is why it's important that I had my own experience, because it's really hard to speak to experiences in this realm with language. Language is so linear and so black and white, and people who can't relate personally often dismiss it as, woo woo or nonsensical, as we know. And that's really, I think, the most damaging thing for people, to have their experience challenged or labeled, pathologized. And so yeah, when I went on to complete my doctoral research in this area, it really transformed the way I engage with my clients, and wanted to support people in kind of coming out of the closet about their own experiences and giving them permission to recognize what they might be repressing because of fear of how they might be seen or misunderstood, and give people permission to be in their fullness with their own stories and their own truths, because that is how we continue to expand our consciousness, not just as individuals, but as a society. So yeah, I worked for several years with ACISTE, which again is the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. And in that capacity, we focused on not just supporting peers, the people who were going through the experiences that weren't really understood in mainstream society, but we focused on educating professionals, specifically mental health professionals, people who might be working as coaches or spiritual directors, those who are likely to encounter experiencers of this nature, and giving them research, giving them actual grounded research and a better understanding of what people need, what they go through, and how that they can not do more harm, but actually support them in their healing and their expansion.
Yeah, wow. I'm having I'm recalling an experience that over time has continued to unfold in meaningful ways for me. And it's this experience. My father passed away when I was very young. I was 18 months old when my father passed away. He was 25 years old when he passed away. So I'm older than my father ever was in life. And I remember an experience that I had as a child, sort of it felt like my insides were trying to be let out. It felt very, very painful, but very unexplainably painful, that my insights were like trying to escape. It was like my body was wanting to not be the barrier between me and everything that is beyond this frame. And I'm thinking more about that, and I suppose that could have been similarly looked at as a spiritual emergency sort of experience. I was having these thoughts, and I have always, because of that experience of my father, I have always had these questions of these existential questions about death and about purpose in life, and why, all of questions of this sort. And that did, at a very early age, that seemed to have triggered this sort of experience for me. So just hearing you speak about how you have helped others, your own experience, it kind of just made that kind of pop into my head. So you help others with these experiences, and you have done this through ACISTE, you've done this through MAPS. Right now, you are founder and director of A Curious Spirit, and so Curious Spirit does facilitate that same sort of work. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the Curious Spirit is a private psychotherapy practice, and we also offer coaching and retreats and community events. And yeah, the Curious Spirit was actually born from my dissertation work. It was kind of the culmination of how will I continue to creatively express this in the world. And as I often say, people who go through these experiences of spiritual emergence, spiritual emergency, it feels very much like it's part of their process to give back and continue to like put a hand out for others who might be going through something similar. So this is just the most natural way for me to do that, is by giving a resource for people who might be experiencing these things, and also letting myself be a resource for other professionals who might need support or consulting around work like this, when their patients are suddenly presenting with something they don't understand, but they want to give them a paradigm beyond the medical model to consider it through.
Absolutely, a paradigm beyond the medical model. What do you make of this paradigm beyond the medical model right now? Assisted psychedelic integration, assisted psychotherapy, psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is being more and more in the mainstream. It's more and more coming into a transformative process of its own by being more available. In the last couple of years, there's been a lot of movement in the advocacy for like legalizing the plants. Decriminalizing nature has done a lot to make psychedelic experiences, psychedelic substances, the use of these things more available to people. But more and more, we're seeing that the evidence is getting through through the channels to make it a viable option for people. What do you make of this kind of collective paradigm shift that is happening around this?
I am grateful, and I think it's about time. Yeah, I think for those of us who've been having experiences like this without the aid of substances, it's really finally giving us some validation, which is important. I've worked with so many people over the years, through ACISTE and even through my dissertation work, hearing the stories of pain and challenges that they've had, really traumatic challenges. I would even say PTSD, because of the way that they were not received. And now that we actually have an authority, which is the research body taking place around psychedelic medicine, we now have new language. We're actually talking about mysticism in mainstream academia, not just this little niche of transpersonal psychology. We're actually talking about mystical experience in mainstream academia. And thank God. It's about time. So the language is there. We're talking about it. And I think it's giving people a lot of hope and possibility for, giving them permission to continue to expand into their fullness, which is really what this is all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there certain experiences that you believe help facilitate that better than others? What do you are there particular experiences that you advise people to go towards, move towards, or maybe things in your own personal practice, transformative experiences that you've you've often used to further the expansion of your fullest expression?
Thank you. It's such a good question. For me personally, I think it's different things at different times. And I do strongly believe, first of all, I'll say I do not think psychedelic medicine is for everyone.
Mhm.
I think there's a lot we still don't understand about what creates challenges for people around psychedelic medicine. And that's not just to say that challenging experiences don't happen and they can't be something that is a positive growth oriented experience, because it is. But I do think psychedelic medicine is not for everyone. And I think there are other ways to access these states of consciousness. And ideas around that could be something like drumming or chanting or a meditation practice or even running. There are so many ways to alter or to enter these altered states that can support somebody in just getting out of the loop of their own mind, right? Because that's really what this is about. Like we identify with these patterns and these personalities, and we can become really stuck with the weight of them. And I think all of these practices and these medicines, again, choose your own lane that speaks to you, they can help us get out of the rut and open up to something new, giving us a new perspective, giving us insight, giving us an understanding of who we are beyond this self-identified ego and this body.
Right. The research does say that at a biological level, at least for some of these experiences, it is allowing the brain to be more malleable, to be more plastic, to be more able to show biological growth. But if we always are treating everything as as a psychological experience that just you can always have a positive psychological integration and kind of ignoring the physical framework that this experience is happening inside of, and as a maybe a conduit of, then we are missing really important piece, because there is sort of concern that people that have maybe had a history of psychiatric instability, and have had maybe a history of mental disorder, or maybe a family history of mental disorder, certain ages and the onset of these things can be propelled by psychedelic experiences as well. But maybe not the experience of psychedelic consciousness necessarily, but the induction of that intentionally with the use, or abusively with the use of substance, can be very problematic for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's face it, there's a lot we don't understand about what we call mental illness, what we understand these diagnoses, these clusters of symptoms to be. And I think this is actually an area that psychedelic research will help us understand down the road as we get more comfortable going there. But right now, we don't know. So yeah, certainly there have been lots of reports of people having, instances of what we'll call psychosis that they may not return from. But I do think that is few and far between. But again, we don't have research, so this is all word of mouth. And right now, because the research is so new and unstable, in the sense that it's still gathering acceptance, there are a lot of people who are still kind of giving it the side eye. But I think the more people come to understand it, the more we'll be able to go further. And right now, it's part of most of the research protocol that we rule out people who are having these family history or personal history of psychosis in any way. And yeah, so we don't know yet, but I think that there's a lot to learn from these altered states, and I'm sure they will give us more insight into what we understand as mental health challenges now.
Yeah, I do believe the same. I do believe that this will give us more insight into mental disorder by looking at how people have also grown from these experiences. Often that sort of that sort of psychosis onset by psychedelic experiences anecdotally, right? Just as you're saying, there's far and few in between, but it has it is out there that is a possibility that one should do this under an assisted, a supervised container, a supervised safe container. But then also it tends to be out of the abuse of these substances, abuse of experience, an abuse of using the combination of things in order to because people are overly eager. And I have played with this, understanding this idea of when people are abusing psychedelic substances, it is as though they are uh, they oh what is the word I'm looking for, they are they are fetishizing the substance over the experience itself. And so they are more concerned about I took the substance rather than what they were able to bring out of that experience and bring that in. But it a lot of that understanding and a lot of what you are able to do in terms of grabbing the insight from your experience and bringing that, integrating that into your life in practical ways, is done within a safe container. It's done in a space of assisted integration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the part that people don't yet fully give credit to. It's part of a process. I say all the time, you can have a psychedelic experience, you can have, a fun trip, but you can either choose to do something with it or not. And it's those days and weeks following your experience, there's generally that 2-week window of plasticity that we can work with that can really have remarkable effects if you choose to work with it. It goes far beyond the day you have your psychedelic journey. But if you don't work with it, then you're most likely going to find yourself where you started. And if your intention was to eradicate some symptoms that were ailing you, mental, physical, or otherwise, you're most likely going to find yourself back there unless you really work with that window of plasticity with somebody who's trained to support you in this to, parcel through what you've gained from that journey and how it applies to how you're living your life and what your ultimate goals are. So there's a lot that can be done, and we don't give enough credit to the therapy part of it. And I hope that that's where we're going as things begin to change around us in this country.
This is a great time to let the tribe know about the Gray Transforms website, graytransforms.com. This is a great place to go to check out all the links to the podcast. It's a great place to support the podcast, to support the channel. You can get a Gray Transforms t-shirt with a transegoic gnosis symbol for transformation on the back. You can get a Gray Transforms bullet journal. This is a simple tool, but this is a tool for mastery. You can get stickers. You can get a Gray Transforms mug. So you can drink great tea in your Gray Transforms mug while you are taking notes in your Gray Transforms bullet journal, while you are listening to high-level transformative conversations on the Gray Transforms podcast. So comment, like, share, subscribe, follow, and together this tribe is moving humanity forward. Let's get back to this conversation. That's a really good point that you brought up about plasticity and a window of plasticity. I think that people tend to believe, oh, because I've had that experience, now my brain is ultimately plastic. It's ultimately malleable. I am ultimately in a state of continued learning and expansion, but it doesn't necessarily happen that way. We fall back into our patterns. We fall back into the very things that maybe the experience has revealed to us that is the work that needs to be done and integrated and worked through and understood in these more effective ways, so that we can make practical use of them in our day-to-day life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're fighting against patterns that are deeply ingrained in us. So you can have a very deep and profound psychedelic experience, or even a non-medicine psychedelic experience, some sort of a spontaneous experience, right? But if you don't work with what you've learned from it, things aren't going to shift. There are lots of people who've had near-death experiences. Some people will tend to remember the more quote unquote spiritual elements of it, and some won't. Well, why is that? Are they resisting them because they're not accepted, or they don't want to work with them, or what are they hiding from? I think there's a lot there to be curious about.
Yeah, maybe a combination of not having the language, not having information. It's like when this we don't know when sort of these anomalous or these uninstigated, unintentional, exceptional human experiences happen in a person's life, and without the knowledge of how to take some of the insight from that experience to see not just the trauma, but the beauty around maybe a traumatic experience, if it's a near death experience of maybe a car crash or something like this. Not having the language and the information to look beyond certain aspects of that experience, then you sort of get lost in the mix, and you don't know where to look.
Absolutely, exactly.
Yeah, there's a really cool idea that this kind of previously you mentioned, we sometimes it's not necessary that the psychedelic consciousness experience is facilitated through a substance. It's that's not necessary. It doesn't need to happen through a substance. It can also happen through many other practices that many traditions, indigenous and otherwise, have facilitated and used and utilized in spiritual practice, but cultural practice all over the world for many hundreds of thousands of years. And this concept by Steve Taylor is this homeostatic disruption. But as we're speaking here, I'm thinking, what would the opposite of that concept be? Sometimes the psychedelic substance can be a homeostatic disruption. Your day-to-day life, your homeostasis as you experience the world is disrupted for a potentially good reason. Potentially it is breaking you out of your patterns. Your patterns is your homeostasis. It's disrupting that homeostasis, disrupting those patterns. And that can be very disorienting. That can be very triggering. That can be very uncomfortable initially. And on the other side of that, you have a window of plasticity. You have a window of malleability to bring in some insight from that experience. But maybe the other side of that is like a collective homeostatic assimilation, something like that. To think more on that term, but I've had personally, I've had experiences with 5-MeO-DMT, so dimethyltryptamine. I've had in a safe container. I've had these experiences, and that facilitated through the substance has felt like all of existence imploding in one moment, in a single moment, and that has a really beautiful value to it. But then there is also facilitation of meditative experiences that I've experienced personally and have had the opportunity to facilitate with others, that is more a pulling away of all the stuff. It's sort of happening in the opposite way and still experiencing this oneness, this psychedelic consciousness.
Yeah, yeah, that's profound, right? And that's not something you can really explain. That's something that you can speak to and point to because you've been there. But the implosion of all consciousness in a moment, I mean, whoa, that's
Yeah.
major. It doesn't get bigger than that.
Right. Like the dissolving of what we know ourselves to be, our ego, our bodies, and this sort of division between everything and who I am, that division dissolving. There's a great book called It's actually right on my shelf here. It's called Why God Won't Go Away. Do you know this book?
I don't know.
Okay. Why God Won't Go Away. It's by Newberg and D'Aquili, and the neuroscience around meditative experiences. What they did one experiment in this book. It elaborates on one experiment that they did, which was with Franciscan nuns and Tibetan Buddhists. And they had both of them do their a prayer practice or their meditation practice. And as they sat in meditation or prayer, they had ran an EEG study on their brain waves, their electrical activity in their neurochemistry, and they found that there was certain orientation areas of the brain that are now there's less activity happening in certain areas, more activity in others. And where it was happening in less activity was happening in these orientation areas. So it spoke to the phenomenology, the subjective experience, the lived experience subjectively of these people, the way that they were describing their experience of touching God. And it was like a dissolution of their orientation areas. So their orientation area was something like me understanding how much space that I take up in this room, and how much space other things take up in this room and in relation to me, and where this room exists. Like that, all of those are like different ways to look at the orientation of where you are in space and time. But then that all there's activity kind of not pulled away, but lessened in those areas, so that you experience the oneness with the space, and the oneness with the things, and the oneness with being dissolved of your separateness.
Yeah,
Really fascinating.
it's amazing. It's wonderful that we can research this now. I think it's
Right.
just so fascinating.
Right.
So
And that is done without psychedelic substance. Do you have any stories of psychedelic substance that you're willing to share?
let's see. I think what I can say, just generally, nothing specific is coming to mind, but I can say that I've worked in supporting people in their integration experiences from some quite severe challenges, such as obsessive compulsive disorder, people who have had lifelong fears, phobias. Definitely a lot of childhood traumas. We all have trauma to some extent, and that is always subjective to the individual. And these experiences shape us in a certain way. And I will say that I've seen so many people benefit from a careful and conscious use of these medicines, and a process of integration over months, sometimes years, that I've really witnessed profound shifts, and people, I think, get their hope back in a way that they haven't had. And again, I think what I want to highlight here is that these aren't magic pills we're talking about. We're talking about hard work. We're just talking about the aid of these medicines to support that.
Absolutely. What has it been like for you as a director of organizations, as a director of harm reduction, as a director of your own private practice? What is it like for you to be in all of these director positions? What should a professional in this area of transpersonal psychology look towards to be a good director, a good leader of their organization, or in other organizations in that leadership capacity?
Yeah, thank you. It's such a good question. And I think the answer is actually very simple. I think it comes down to listening more deeply to the people we're engaging with, and getting out of the lens that we are the authority in any way, shape, or form, and meeting them heart to heart, human to human, trusting that there's some wisdom there that perhaps we can assist them in better understanding themselves. I'm such a big believer in that, we have this knowing inside of us. We, our bodies, our vessels, our minds, our beings are so intelligent. And I think we could benefit from more people holding space for us to discover that ourselves without being lectured to, without being diagnosed, without being prescribed. I think there's just so much power in holding space and being empty, being void of the compulsion to point or direct, right? Ironic that these are director titles. Yeah. Letting people be self-led and encouraging them to get in touch with their innate intelligence. I think that is something that we need to move toward as a collective society to get out of this very diminishing place that we tend to put individuals in when they fall outside of the scope of what we call normal experiences. And yeah, I think this is where growth comes from. Growth comes from more people tapping into their truth and feeling empowered by that in a way that helps them be in their authenticity and become fully expressed. And this is why I love the idea of spiritual emergence so much. It's like we are all these seeds of potential, and we're here in this world, and we require certain resources to blossom into our fullest expression, really to flower into what we're meant to become. But if we don't have the proper environment, the proper soil, the proper sunshine, and the proper nutrition, right, we're not ever going to be able to do that. And we can only do that for each other.
I love that is where growth happens, because while we are facilitators, healers, we are helpers, supporters for the integration of others' experiences and others' healing, we as clinicians, as counselors, as therapists, as these conduits for integration in people's experiences, as these helpers and supporters and healers, we get so much healing through this. We get such a blessed opportunity, such a heartfelt appreciation and gratitude, and it is a divine grace to have the opportunity to help others.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. It is a mutual, there's a mutuality. There is something in the relational element that takes place in ceremonies, in retreats, in psychedelic therapy, in regular therapy, right? In coaching courses. There's something there about the relational element that I think we don't give enough credit to. And so the way we show up as the space holders, as the guides, I think has so much value for really giving people permission.
Right. And the way that we show up as leaders of our organization and directors, it is just the same. It's not all, every moment seems to be an opportunity for healing and integration, and every moment that maybe one is directing or leading or delegating in any capacity, where they have the ability to listen, where they have the ability to receive, the ability to have empathy and compassion for the challenges of others and the areas where people need to be encouraged and challenged as well to move beyond the edges of what they are currently believing they are capable of, but like seeing the potential, like, oh, you could, there's more that you could be and do is incredibly healing for you. Like, so often the healing that, or the advising, the directing, the delegating for others is so informative of my own experience and the experience of ourselves. And we become better and better people together. We do all of this together. We do this in community. We do this in ceremony. That's why these experiences happen culturally, historically, in community, in space of tribes, and we do it together. We do the healing together.
Yeah. What a novel concept, huh?
Yeah, it is awesome. So, thank you so much, Katrina. This was an amazing conversation. I really appreciate it. I think that there's a lot of value that people will get from understanding that psychedelic experience is continuing to be researched. It's continuing to grow in the mainstream in ways that will be helpful and healing for others, done in a safe manner, so that we can bring the insights of these experiences into our lives in a practical manner that is safe, and that will just nourish the lives of individuals and the lives of the collective.
That says it all. Absolutely, Travis. Yeah, I really am grateful for what you're holding here and this opportunity to facilitate more conversations and generate more understanding. So thank you for your service in this area. And it's good to be part of your tribe. So
Thank you so much. It's good to have you a part of this tribe. It's good to be a part of your tribe too.
thank you.
So thank you. Is there anywhere that people should go to connect with you, Katrina? A Curious Spirit, is it acuriousspirit.org?
Yeah, it's actually The Curious Spirit. So thecuriousspirit.org. You can find me on Instagram at Katrina_The Curious Spirit. And yeah, happy to connect with anyone that feels called to connect.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Travis.
My tribe is so dope. I love these people. I love these conversations that I'm having, these conversations with transpersonal psychology professionals, these transformative professionals, these people that are changing lives through their art, through their craft. This is an amazing podcast. We have more conversations coming. I'm excited to share with you more. That conversation with Dr. Katrina Michelle on psychedelic harm reduction, it needs to be shared. It needs to be received. It needs to be heard by more people that are interested in psychedelics, interested in the harm reduction of the experience of using psychedelics, interested in the research. So comment, like, share, subscribe, like, thumbs up, all of those things. Review, give a great review in wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you. Together, we are moving humanity forward. Check out some more videos.